NASA says we're going back to the moon. But here's what they don't want you asking. When Washington spends $93 billion of our money to get there, who actually owns the frontier? The Artemis II mission isn't just a lunar mission, it's a blueprint. It's a bet that a centralized, contractor driven government program can define the next chapter of human civilization before free markets ever get a shot at it. China's watching. The contractors are cashing their checks. And the US taxpayer is covering the bill. Are we going to the moon as a free people or as taxpayers financing another permanent political machine? I'm Big John. This is Liberty Lens. And as always, I have possibly a pseudo rocket scientist here to help us figure this all out. None other than Mr. Mike Termont. Mike, how are you doing today?
Good to be with you, John. I am solidly on planet Earth, and so I feel pretty good about the whole discussion today.
Good.
Thanks for doing this. Let's not accidentally oversell this. Yes, my undergraduate degree is in aeronautical engineering, but let's just say the engineering department at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute was absolutely thrilled when I told my advisor that I was thinking about going to business school. Okay.
Okay.
So thrilled were they that they put in a good word with me for some scholarship to go to business school. I was literally bribed to get out of the aerospace business.
So those RPI nerds gave you the boot, is basically what you're saying.
So they were thrilled that I was going to go to business school.
Okay, fair enough. All right, Mike. So let's start just in general. Before we look at some of the other implications of all this, there's just the mission we could talk about, just as a technological achievement, an achievement in engineering. The Artemis II mission, this phase of it is involving the Orion ship, which is designed to carry humans basically to the far side of the moon. We've already set a distance record that goes back to 1970, I think Apollo
Yep.
12 or 13, right? For the furthest distance human beings have ever been from planet Earth. And the mission is also partly there to test that technology, the flight technology, being able to come back, the life support systems and such. And then also to kind of, while we're doing that flyby of the moon, get a better look at the dark side of the moon, get some potential landing spots for future, maybe the lack of the, maybe colonization, for lack of a better word, if not human settlers, at least staging areas for future missions, say Mars
Yep.
missions, where
Yep.
basically the moon becomes our launching spot. So, talk to me a little bit first of the mission, the technical
Yep.
stuff, anything you want to say, like how amazing is this?
Well, it is amazing, and we wish them well, right? If you're going to spend 93 billion, let's hope that this goes very, very well. There's every indication that it will. The astronauts are enormously well trained. They're very talented. More importantly, the folks behind the development of the spaceship and everything that goes into that are extremely well trained. To your point, they are well funded, well motivated. NASA does a good job of testing these things in phases, so we have every reason to believe that this is going to be successful. The real problem is, I think you framed it correctly, the real problem is balancing the cost, which is enormous, with the benefits. And the benefits are, let's go with tenuous.
Mm.
The benefits are not obvious. Yeah, the idea is to learn how to stage on the moon in order to go even farther. The real problem here, John, is that it's not obvious that in the long run, much less the short run, we're going to get anything significant in terms of benefit to the United States or to humanity.
Mm.
Certainly in the short run, we're not going to, right? No one is even arguing, no one is even pretending, no one is even offering a conjecture that this is going to bring any benefit to America or our species in the short run. The argument is that at some point we may need to relocate a significant number of humans in order to continue our species, our our lives, our
Our
life
existence.
as a species.
Yeah.
And number two, that there could be some commercial, could be some, I should say, economic benefit if we were able to, in the future, develop the capability of efficiently bringing back rare earth minerals to the planet Earth, uh, or if we were able to learn how to conduct certain research in a weightless environment, or if we were able to conduct certain manufacturing that we
Right.
would not want done because of certain byproducts or pollution
Right.
or the difficulty of dealing with gravity. It could be lots of reasons. We were able to learn how to do this someplace else. It's conceivable, it's possible there'd be significant economic benefits. Okay, a couple of problems. One is it's really hard to argue against that when nobody knows really what we're talking about, right? This is a conjecture. This is a bet.
Right.
And the other one is it's really hard to have this discussion when you don't know when those benefits are going to come, how large they're going to be. Even if you were to concede, it's very likely that there would be benefits. And therefore, when should we start this development process?
Right.
No one is suggesting that we're going to be getting benefits in a decade, 2 decades, even 3 decades. This is something, 3, 4, 5, 10, 15 decades out. We're going to need these capabilities. Okay, let's say that the great bulk of benefits are going to come in. I'm just going to pick a number, right? Let's say the great benefits come in 50 years. Okay. When do you want to start developing the capability to harvest these benefits? Whether it's relocating humanity, learning how to do research and manufacture elsewhere, or bring rare earth minerals back to our planet. When do you want to start? Okay, if you were to start today, we quite literally don't know how to do this. We're going to figure it out on the way.
Right.
And we certainly don't have all of the technologies. We have most of the science. The science, mostly we have down. We don't have all the technologies, and we certainly don't have the equipment to get this done. But the theory is that we're going to develop this along the chronological path to get there. If we were to wait some period of time, not only would the science be fully settled instead of mostly settled, but the technologies would be more developed, and we might even have some of the equipment ready to go because of private sector investment.
Right.
So you got to ask, how much time do you lose if you wait a decade? You certainly don't wait 10 you certainly don't lose 10 years if you were to wait 10 years.
Right. It's an opportunity loss, an opportunity question, which business people are very adept at. Right. It's like, okay, if I wait 10 years and redeploy my resources and my assets to something more productive, how much far behind do I fall, or even if I fall behind at all, as opposed to going all in now? Because even if you and I were idealists, Mike, and maybe we are at heart, we say this is how human progress works, right? Sometimes you blindly go,
Yep.
it's the brave idealistic souls that do this. But you don't see the administration doing this for climate change, for example. You don't see them doing it for other earthbound initiatives,
More.
where there might be, like, one of the climate change things, to draw an analogy, is, okay, at some point we will have to deal with this, but is it a just-in-time issue, or is it a we need decades issue?
Right.
And I think even the people who are not quite denialists, but not quite doomsayers when it comes to climate change, will find that middle ground and say, we might have to come up with a solution slowly over 20, 30, 40, 50 years, as
Right.
opposed to we got to start now and start spending our limited resources now. And the same might be applied to space exploration. When
Well,
you
that's a really interesting point and a good analogy. If you were to understand, say, 100 years ago, everything that we understand now about the way pollution works, about how it aggregates, how it disperses or doesn't, and what are the potential impacts on the ozone layer and the implications for climate change. If you knew everything 100 years ago that we know now, you might decide, well, gee, we should probably get on this,
Right.
early in the 20th century. Okay, that's possible. On the other hand, you might decide to put things off. And to make my point, if you were to have all of your druthers, if you had all of your choices about when to begin to go to the moon and to go to Mars, right? You
Right.
still don't know all the benefits. You don't know whether there'll be any benefits, by the way.
Right.
Would you start in the 1800s? Probably not.
No.
Would you, right? If we're going to spend 1/3 of 1% of GDP on this, and we're probably going to end up spending per year, right? Per year,
Right.
we're going to end up spending a lot more than that. If you were to decide, I'm going to spend that proportion of our total national income, would you decide to begin in the 1820s? You've already had the Industrial Revolution. My alma mater, Rensselaer, was started in 1824.
Right.
So you've got a couple of big institutions up and running, developing technologies. RPI played a major role in developing lunar rovers, for example,
Right.
and all kinds of propulsion. This is probably the big reason why they were thrilled that I was going to go to business school and got the heck out of the way once I got my degree. No, 1824 is probably a little too early. Okay, how about 1924? How about 1924? Does that sound like the right year? We had some rockets. We had some rockets then.
Well, considering you just used the word Wright, and the Wright brothers were had just invented
A couple of decades earlier, had gotten off the ground at Kitty Hawk, and we were developing some propulsion technologies. Probably a little bit too early.
yeah.
Okay, what about 2024? Because I'm going to assert that 2024 is going to look a lot like 1924 from the vantage point of 2124.
Right. Right.
I think we're going to look back from 2124 and say, I cannot believe we started this, right?
Right.
In 2024 and went to the moon in 2026 so that we can get to Mars in 2030. And we spent all that money and all that energy and all that time, when if we had just waited until 2096,
when this new technology was discovered, or this new machinery was
when we're already flying around,
right?
When Elon Musk's grandson is already flying, one of his many grandsons is flying us around in outer space, right? And we were halfway there. Commercially, we're already going to the moon.
Yeah, it was one of those things. What you're saying is, I remember there was a comic book when the Guardians of the Galaxy, which is obviously now a movie franchise. As a young man, I was reading the Guardian of the Galaxy's comic book, and the Star-Lord, the hero in there, he finally, he was sent in cryogenic suspension for a 200-year trip to the nearest, what they thought was inhabited planet, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
The only human to go, sacrificed his life, his family, gets to the planet, he wakes up, and there's a party thrown for him there by other humans. And he's like, how'd you get here? It's impossible. And they tell him, like, oh, we beat you here. We didn't feel like waking you up. We've been here for a century already. And he says, but Einsteinian physics, and before and they cut him off and say, oh, that was replaced by Queen G physics like 100 years ago, right? And he goes, it was all for nothing, and he just stood there like that. And it's comical, but it's kind of indicative of what you were saying, which is like, we don't know when we're going to
start too soon. It's like leaving the house at 4:30 to go to a movie downtown.
Right. Yeah. It's
you really want to do that, or you want to shoot for the 9 o'clock show and wait until after rush hour?
Right. Now, the interesting part about this, Mike, is this is only an issue when the government is stealing our money to fund this, right? This is not an issue if Elon Musk does it.
Well, it's not an issue for you and me. If Elon Musk was going to Mars this year, I would be just as critical, but I wouldn't be so pissed.
Right. You wouldn't care because it's not your money he's spending, right? And Elon, to be fair, obviously is involved in the Artemis II project. I think the self-landing rockets are his piece of this, his SpaceX's piece of this, and all that. which goes into the whole thing, right? But
Yeah.
it only becomes an issue when it's a government funded thing.
Well, it becomes
And
a much bigger issue, and it becomes an ethical issue.
right,
If
because
you're stupid on your own dime, I do stupid things all the time, but you don't get mad at me.
or idealistic, right? Even if I give it the best framing possible, they're looking for a contingency. They're afraid we're going to exhaust Earth's resources. Humanity has to survive somewhere. I get all that. And maybe when I sit back and dream, I get the same feelings. But in the 60s, to use an analogy, right, it wasn't just NASA proving we could go to the moon. There was the idealist version of it. The more practical version was militarily, we didn't want to cede the high ground to the communists. We
Right.
didn't want to cede the high ground to the Soviet Union. We were literally afraid they would have a space station of some sort and drop nuclear bombs on the US, and we couldn't reach them. That was
Yep.
terrifying to us as a government.
Yep.
Do we see sort of the same thing here, Mike? We're
Yes.
finally reaching out to our allies. Canada and the ESA, the European Space Agency, are involved in Artemis II. We're actually cooperating, which with
Yep.
Trump, you never know that's going to be the case.
At
But
the moment.
not at the moment.
It's a
But
Tuesday.
but is it mainly the specter of a Chinese lunar colony that's driving this?
Well, I think that's certainly an aspect of it. There's an entertainment aspect of it, right? To
Right.
your point, using the word idealism, there's an idealistic aspect to this. To your point about it being, there being a military element to this, it's why we're so interested in Greenland, right? We don't want others to control it. Well, is it really a big deal? No. If we owned Greenland, would it make any difference whatsoever in our ability to get things done that we want to get done? No, it wouldn't. But it would at least preclude the Chinese from taking over Greenland,
Right.
right? Or the Australians cutting deals with the Chinese that would be against our interests, which is the real issue in Greenland. And it's interesting that you brought up the 1960s. John Kennedy's original speech pointed out that we do these things not because they are easy, but literally because they are hard. And I did appreciate that you and I, when we quote this, we always say, because it is hard,
Hard.
right?
Yeah.
Because it is hard, as John Kennedy used to say,
Right.
because it is hard. His big justification for going to the moon was quite literally because it was hard. Because it would, there's this old concept in change management of what we used to call the big, hairy, audacious goal.
Right.
Right. And that means a goal so big, so hairy, so audacious that it would change you in your effort to do it. In other words, if you could do this without changing yourself, it's not big enough.
Right. Right.
So we would have to change as a nation. And that meant culturally rallying around a big objective that we all shared. And it meant developing certain technologies. So this is the argument that we need to do this because we're going to develop things along the way. They're going to help us in lots of other aspects.
You mean beyond Tang and Velcro?
Beyond Tang, which was a heck of a product. The youngsters don't know Tang. That was the dehydrated orange drink.
Right. Just
space food sticks.
Yes.
Which was the big snack treat.
Anti-gravity pens, the whole, yeah.
Anti-gravity pens were awesome.
Right. Velcro actually came out of that. So I agree with you that,
good thing.
Yeah. So, but to the idealism point, those of us that remember, like I was maybe 10 or 12 at the time, maybe even a little bit younger, the first men on the moon and everything, the human connection you had that you felt, and it was global. When Apollo 13 was in danger of not making it back in one piece, the whole world
was a big deal.
To their TV sets, people standing in Times Square.
Yeah, it was a big
deal. Thousands of people, right?
Yep.
That was part of what you said was the big, hairy, audacious goal, right? It was like humanity united in a time when there was the Cold War at its peak.
Yep.
Do you see that now? Because now we had this launch, it was a blip. You know what I mean? It wasn't that people were glued to their TVs. There was no 70 share watching CNN to see this launch or anything like that. Do you feel that we're past that stage as humanity? Are we past where the whole world can unite around rather an idealistic scientific
I
or
don't think
engineering feat?
so. I don't think we're beyond that culturally, but we have certain roadblocks.
Mm,
One is that we've already been to the moon before. So it's
yes.
just literally not quite as big a deal. Okay. Uh, when it comes time to land on Mars,
Yeah.
we'll have that discussion. Maybe that's a half a dozen years away. If we're still doing this podcast, we'll
We'll
see,
talk
right?
about
We'll see, and we'll have to replay this and
it. Right.
and reminisce about the fact that we didn't know how big a deal it was going to be. The other roadblock, of course, is political, as you pointed out. Much of the rest of the world is not rooting for us. And I think that we've made it harder for some of our friends to root for us.
Right.
So, does that hold things back? Absolutely. And to be fair, we are on the other side of 1974. We're on the other side of Watergate. In 1969, we still trusted everything about our government.
Right. Institutional trust was
Gone.
at an old. It's gone now. Back then, you still had institutional trust.
Right.
Now,
And so everything was rah rah. Rooting for NASA was tantamount to rooting for the government. It was the same. It was the same feeling as rooting for the Olympic team.
yeah, baseball and apple pie. It was the
Yeah.
same
And
thing.
today we don't even root for the Olympics
Yeah.
as much as we did then, because everyone knows about the steroids and the money, the lack of amateur athletes, right? We
Right.
now send professional hockey players and we send professional basketball players, and there's steroids are all involved and billions of dollars training these wonderful athletes. A lot has been undermined. And then all the politics involved. We're also on the other side of 1972, the horror in Munich. But when we hit Watergate and stopped trusting our own government, that was, a pinprick.
Right.
And then since then, all the way leading up into the second Trump administration, we've just continuously lost trust in our institutions. I'm not suggesting we shouldn't have. I mean, we have learned that we should have been a lot more skeptical. I mean, Richard Nixon really was a crook, right?
Right. Right. Literally. Yeah.
We've been trusting things that we shouldn't have been trusting. And I think that the Mars mission suffers from some of that. How enthusiastic do you want to be? You know that there are billionaires who are going to make a lot of money off of this. Is it going to help you and me? That's not clear. Is this just politically motivated? Is someone manipulating us? We're much more aware of the fact that a government spends money stupidly. Does this fall into that category?
Right.
Parenthetically, yes, it does. So there's all kinds of reasons why you wouldn't be quite as excited about it. Can you imagine when John Kennedy gave that speech, the piece of the speech that gets dropped out? You never see this quoted. There's a very important piece of the speech that gets dropped, even on YouTube. It's very hard to find a YouTube of the entire speech. You just find pieces spliced together. He says, why do we climb Mount Everest? Why does Rice play Texas?
Right. That's a reference to a really underpowered football
Yeah,
team taking
he's
down a
at
power.
Rice, a
Yeah.
big tech school in Texas, and they would play the University of Texas in football every year and get their butts kicked, because everyone who plays Texas gets their butt kicked, right?
Right.
But Rice would do it anyway. Well, why did they do that? Why did they do it? Because it is hard. And that was his big line. Can you imagine today we having so much cultural affinity and alignment with the President of the United States that he could make a quip about spending what would be the equivalent of hundreds of billions of dollars today? It's a not completely insignificant proportion of our GDP to go to the moon.
Right.
And it would be well received. I think most of us would say, you better stiffen up, mister. This is no joking matter.
Right. Do you think he's better served, President Trump, when it comes to the Artemis II mission, if he just flat out came out and said, we're really hot for this because it meshes with the Space Force I created for no reason a couple of years ago, and you got to keep an eye on those Chinese, because that's a playbook that's worked for him politically, right? Like, as long as you throw in the Chinese book, like we take private companies, we force sales because they're aligned with the Chinese government, right?
I think so. I think he would be much better off. He hasn't gotten in very much involved with selling the space race in
Right.
general, but I do think that there is political hay to be made there if he were honest about it,
Mm.
said that there's a military aspect, commercial aspect, protecting Americans and our species aspect that we don't really know about.
Right.
It may seem premature, but this is why we're not going to spend an enormous amount of money on it. I've
Right.
taken great pains and steps to contract us to control the technological development that comes out of this. And so I'm very optimistic about that. I think if he were to double down on that, there would be less pressure to do other things. We're having this discussion in the midst of a war in Iran. There'd be less political pressure to do other culturally captivating things if we were to triple down on how exciting it is to go to Mars. Now, that's not to suggest that in any way, shape, or form, I think this is a good idea. I think this is a colossally stupid idea to go to Mars this early. And it may well turn out to be it's colossally stupid to go to Mars ever.
Right. Right. But I see. Maybe I'm a little more idealistic than you, and I'll say, like, I agree that there's reason to do this. I
New
just
Hampshire, that's some place where people should go. New
Right.
Hampshire. Okay.
Yes,
Spend 1/3 of 1% of your personal income on a trip to New Hampshire.
that's right. Um, but I would argue that it's left better in the hands of the Elon Musks and the Jeff Bezoses and stuff. You know why they're doing it. They're doing it for personal reasons and to turn a buck. So you know why they're doing it, and either you're on board or you're not. You can invest in their companies or choose not to. That's fine. I have no problem with that. But be a little more honest. If you're the U.S. government, why is NASA involved in this? Why are you still controlling NASA in that sense? Fair enough. I get it. There's military components. Be upfront with it and start, letting people know about it. Mike, we touched on very quickly the international aspect on this. Now, under normal circumstances, I might say, hey, this is actually good for U.S. foreign policy. We're involving our allies in something that's aspirational, at least on the surface. It's aspirational. This is good for humanity, Canada and ESA, European Space Agency, and all these wonderful things. Even if we kind of ignore that the Chinese might actually be the best partners for this type of endeavor, right, in terms
Yes.
of abilities and stuff. But let's leave that aside. But hey, let's at least strengthen our bonds. How much do you think? Like, I happen to think that this was a leftover of an administration before the current one, where there was this international community involved in this. But talk to me a little bit, Mike, not too much, on the international aspect of this and how it may play a part either to help or derail the Artemis
Yeah, I
project.
agree with you. I think that the potential benefit, and if you believe that going to Mars is a good idea, and I don't,
Mhm.
okay, but let's adopt the framework that we think this is a good idea,
Right.
because no amount of partnering is going to turn a bad idea into a good one.
Agreed. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
it's like one of the first things you learn in finance is no matter how cheaply you can raise money, it ain't going to turn a bad investment into a good one.
Right.
Okay. So no amount of politicking is going to fix that. But let's say you are hell bent on getting your butt to Mars and you think this is a good idea. Making this an international project could raise you a lot of money in
Right.
the long run to get this done because the European GDP is on the same order of magnitude as ours. It's not like the Canadians are poor. They're not. They can make significant contributions.
Right.
And in the long run, does that mean that you would be in a better bargaining position to include the Russians and the Chinese? Absolutely does. In other words, what I mean by that is one of the reasons you don't necessarily want to invite the Russians and the Chinese in is because if they make a significant investment, they're going to want a significant piece of everything, right?
Right.
The technology, bragging rights, the stuff you bring back, seats in the future to put people
Right.
in the colony, But if the political base is more broad than just the United States, if it's the United States and the Canadians and the Europeans and the Japanese and the Australians and fill in the blank, everybody's on board. Then you invite the Chinese and the Russians in. It's not that big a deal.
Right.
It's not that big a deal politically. It's a little bit easier. Frankly, it's a little bit easier for them, I think, in some ways, depending on their attitude at that moment, and what you need to give up. You got a bigger investment base. You don't have to give them such a large proportion of the pie.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So it's interesting to me because I find it hilarious that this thing launched and I wasn't even aware of it, to be honest with you. Normally, I'd be like, "Oh, this thing is launching tomorrow
Yeah.
or in a week
Yeah.
or a month," and at
I'm the
least
one that had to suggest that we do the podcast on this today.
that was genuinely embarrassing to me, Mike, in our production meeting, right? It's like, "Oh, wow, I moved on to other topics. The Artemis thing wasn't even on my radar," and that's on me. But to me, for someone who essentially grew up in the sciences, has STEM education and career background, right? Like for me to just ignore this entirely was like, it made me self doubt and also made me analyze how I perceive these government led, what should be scientific endeavors, how I view them now. Now I view everything with the skepticism, which again is probably not probably is a healthy way to look at it
Yeah,
when the government's
absolutely it
involved.
is.
But
It also means you don't watch that much CNN.
I don't watch that much CNN.
CNN is all about the Artemis.
So now you know my secret. I never watch CNN. But the point is, I'm also a little concerned for our sort of like, for my personal at least, that idealism, that aspirational thing. Maybe it's a function of age. Maybe it's a function of being jaded or whatever. But I just didn't view this as the way I would have, say, the Apollo missions, right? Or even the space shuttle mission, right? Because that was the first returnable craft, right? And you were like, wow, this is Star Trek coming to life.
Yeah.
I
Well, like
can't
I
wait.
say, you may feel differently when we finally get to Mars. You may say, "Ooh, now pinch
Now,
me. I got to see that."
agree.
Now, I
But
really want to get to another subject.
that's what I was going to segue into, Mike.
Oh,
Your
excellent,
excitement.
excellent. Because I think that this is at least as fun and
Yes.
at least as dumb.
Okay. Fair enough. So this part
Assuming
is.
you're thinking what I'm thinking.
Yes, I think we're aligned. So let me get it out, and then we'll see if we're aligned or not. Part of this idealism and this sort of like, oh man, I can't wait to see where this leads us and what discoveries we make, is of course what used to be affectionately referred to as the tinfoil hat people, which is the people who think there's little green aliens running around, or cleverly disguised serpent people, lizard people, or whatever. Among these is Tim Burchett, one of our representatives there. Now, he's certainly not unique in this perspective, Mike, but there's a lot of there's a culture that claims there's a long-term U.S. cover-up of UFOs, aliens, that the Area 51 people, that we have recovered alien spaceships, that there's spaceships right now that are traveling underwater. They're super submarines from other planets, galaxies, time dimensions. Obviously, there's a whole sort of intricate novelization of what's going on. Now,
The remains from the Roswell crash are not where people think they are, by the way.
right,
They're in
okay.
my garage.
Without being with scientific certainty saying there are no aliens, there are no other worlds, right? Which I think is starting to be the general consensus of a lot of physicists and astrophysicists, that it's probably not the case, that there's other civilizations, intelligent beings out there. But without saying that with certainty, there is this crowd on Earth that believes they're already here. We've already stolen their technology. It's being kept for nefarious purposes in some government basement right next to the Lost Ark from that Indiana Jones found.
Yep.
Um, talk to me about that, Mike. Is that the
Yep.
group we were talking about? Yeah. So how do you feel about a U.S. Is Burchett a congressman or a senator? I'm sorry, I get that confused.
Congressman, Tennessee.
Congressman from Tennessee.
Yep.
A, how do you feel about his statements? And B, how do you feel about someone like that being a legislator?
I don't mind him being a legislator. I don't want him making decisions about how to spend money. Look,
Okay.
some level setting for the benefit of anyone who is listening. The chances of there being intelligent life somewhere else in the universe are right at 100%.
Really?
Right at 100%. Anyone who spends a great deal of energy thinking about this with a technical background who tells you otherwise is teasing you. It's right about 100%. There is absolutely no evidence to believe that we are unique. There is no evidence to believe that Earth is the only place where this could have happened.
So yeah, I'm almost positive I saw Brian Greene say that he's
Well,
now.
you may have.
Yeah, that he thinks it's around 0%. But anyway, that aside,
well, he's wrong. It's around 100%.
Yeah.
Now, that is completely irrelevant. The chances of us making meaningful contact with them and them having an intelligence that would make it worthwhile and interesting is probably around zero. Probably around zero. But what I think really matters is not zero, near zero times near 100 ends up with some number between 0 and 100, right? And I don't know whether that's 1 or 99. Right. What's going to happen. What really matters is that this doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter to the federal government to find out. It doesn't matter to me for the federal government to find out. Now, it may matter a great deal whether we are visited, right? If bad people come to visit us and they blow us up, that would suck.
Yes.
Let's stipulate that. That would suck. If they were to come and visit us and tell us we're doing this wrong, here's how to do it, whether that's tech or democracy, right? Be nice to each other, and we're able to live in harmony and peace the rest of eternity. That would be awesome. That'd be awesome. Those two things. So it could matter. I'm not suggesting it can't matter. What I'm suggesting is knowing in advance doesn't matter.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Given where we are today, knowing whether they crashed in New Mexico, knowing whether they're going to come next Friday at 5 doesn't matter for the following reason. What do you think we're going to do about it? Either they want to blow us up or they don't. Either they want to tell us how to be better people and survive in peace and harmony, or they don't. The difference between their intelligence and ability to do things and ours is not like the difference between the dung beetle and us. It's much, much larger than that.
Right.
Let me explain.
Sure.
According to their technology, they're able to travel upwards of the speed of light and go where they want to go. According to our science, that can't be done.
Right.
Not merely that we don't know how. We believe it's impossible. They know not only that that's wrong, but they know how to do it, and they figured out it. So it's not just a technological difference, it's a scientific difference.
Right. We're not capable of even beginning to understand the mechanism by which they could visit us, because we know that the speed of light is the maximum to our understanding. You can't, that it would take an eternity to go and come back from the nearest star. Yes, you're right.
Right. It's just not even comparable. Okay. So if this society that comes to visit us does, let's say they're bad and they want us to be dead. So
Yes.
what are you going to, and you find out that they're coming or that they've been here
Yes.
or that you find out that they're coming in a few weeks.
Right.
Everyone look busy, they're coming and we want to impress them. And by the way, they're coming and they're going to kill us. What are you going to, what are you going to, what's your plan? What's
Right.
your plan? You don't have a plan. Don't even talk to me about that.
Yeah.
Maybe a heads up would be nice. I could tell my friends and family that I love them. I love you, John, just in case
Yes.
they blow us up.
Yes.
But there's not a whole lot you can do about that. And if
Right.
they're coming to tell us that we're doing it wrong, what are you going to do? Start doing it right in the next few years? Like, you know
Right.
what? You're right. We should stop war and stop being mean to each other and stop all of this polarization of politics, and we should work together. Because what? Because the aliens are coming? No, there is no level of information
Right.
for which I want to pay. I mean, would I be curious? Of course, if it's on CNN, you'll miss it, by the way. But if it were on CNN,
right.
I'm probably going to pick up on it, and I'm going to be okay. That's cool, but I still got to make dinner. Well, actually, Nancy makes dinner. I still got to eat dinner, right? It just doesn't change anything. There is no pending decision on this information.
Right. I agree with you. Yeah. But do you, given that, which I agree with you wholeheartedly, by the way, whether they exist or not, does it trouble you at all that there's someone in office preoccupied with that decision, though?
No. I think, for starters, he could be right. I just don't care. He could be right. What bothers me, and by the way, for the benefit of our viewing audience, what Tim is saying, Tim Burchett, the representative from Tennessee, what he is saying is that he has seen evidence that the government has that there are aliens among us who have already visited. Okay, we know this. We know that there is evidence. It's just that it's not very good evidence, right? There's a whole bunch of things that are unexplained. Pilots have seen things. They don't know what it means. Are these aliens? Let me give you a silly example to illustrate a way to think about it.
Right.
Okay. If you were to take a flashlight and shine it on the moon, this can be a very big flashlight. Work with me here. This is a thought experiment.
Right.
You got a really powerful flashlight. You shine it on the moon. And you can see up on the moon a little dot where the light hits it, right?
Right.
And you take your hand and you give it a little flick like this, right? You're going to see the dot on the moon move really quickly.
Right.
Faster than the speed of light. That doesn't mean anything useful is moving at the speed of light. It doesn't mean there's an alien. It doesn't mean we have learned to break the light barrier for speed. It just means that there is an observable phenomenon that appears to be one thing, and it's frankly not very interesting.
Right.
And it's not even really a very interesting thought experiment that Mike is offering. That's how boring this is.
Right.
There are things that you can see that you cannot explain. That does not mean that they're important. Doesn't mean that they're unimportant, but it doesn't mean that they're important. Is that an explanation? Of course it's not an explanation. I'm just merely making a point that there's a lot of stuff in this world that we don't understand. More for me than for most people, right? The less you understand about the world, the more interesting it is. But you've got to let it go a little bit. You can't get yourself all worked up. The only thing that concerns me is the possibility that Tim Burchett or anyone else in Congress wants to spend money on this. NASA has already offered, if you give us enough billions, we'll endeavor to figure this out. Oh, so gracious. I can just imagine. I mean, these guys are wonderful.
Yeah, just like many consultants, I'm sure they're all not motivated by money at all and just interested in pursuing the truth. Yeah, that's a great point because
as a matter of fact, I think you and I should call Tim.
Yeah,
for $7 million, you and I could could analyze this situation over the next several years.
You're a lot more philosophical than I am in that particular case, juxtaposing our respective cultural heritages. You'd figure I'd be the one sitting here philosophizing while you would be dutifully doing some engineering work in the side there. But
At least putting together slides about it.
yes, exactly. Okay, so that's interesting there to kind of look in there, because they are a not insignificant portion of people in this country that do hold these beliefs, and that that they
And
are.
they might be right.
That's it. Yeah,
I
they
just
might
don't care.
be exactly from a government. Yes, from a government policy position.
I
am.
just don't care. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter. To say I don't care, that's a bit of an exaggeration. But it
I think
doesn't matter.
it doesn't motivate you. It doesn't motivate you.
It doesn't motivate me to spend resources and time and energy and money on this. I might get in the car and drive. If the aliens are down the street and throwing a block party, and I'm going,
Right.
right? But do I want to spend $1 trillion of other people's money on it? No.
Yeah.
If there's something, if the aliens want to communicate with us, they will. And if they don't want to, they won't. And no government program is going to change them from not wanting to wanting to.
Perfect. That's perfect. And Mike, just because you gave me the opportunity, I'm going to close out the episode by saying, for people who do have resources and do want to spend it on something valuable to them, tell us about the new book, Broken, of which you are the editor.
Well, that's awfully fun. Broken refers to not the editor, but it refers to our politics. Broken, how I didn't know we were going to get this plug today, so I'm a little unprepared. But sure. I did have a book with me. Broken, how American politics is driving civil unrest, financial collapse, and war. I'm the editor. The editor is the least interesting part about the book. There are 13 authors with essays in here that are absolutely fascinating about the implications of the polarized politics in the United States for war, civil unrest, and for the financial collapse that we see coming, all of which is much more important than the meaning of UFOs. And for that reason, I suggest people go to MikeTermott.com, click on Broken the book, and learn a little bit about it. You can buy one on Amazon, only cost you a few dollars. But even if you don't want to make that huge investment, if you don't want to make yourself a better person for $16, you can read some about it on the website and reach out to me and we can talk about it.
Absolutely. And I've already bought my copy from Amazon. It's a great read. The address is right there at the bottom, MikeTermott.com/broken. You could also scan the QR code on the screen. It'll take you right to Mike's website where you can take a look at the book. And if you are so motivated, spend some money and read it.
Not a lot of money. It's $16 on Amazon. Let's not get carried away. As a matter of fact, Amazon was running a special. You can get it for $15.20. I thought that was weird.
Hey, every little bit helps, right? All right. Do us a favor. Hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button. It really helps us out with the algorithm on YouTube. We really appreciate it. Follow Mike at MikeTermott_ on X, at MikeTermott_ on X. Until next time, for Mike Termott and myself, Big John, peace, everyone.